But nevertheless, this is something that represents a theoretical frame in which the hypothesis is that some way this will mark the evolution of the human rights of the migrants in the world. And certainly, even though the United States and Mexico are far away from the experience of integration that I'm illustrating here, in the United States already are happening certain things, such as what you find in California's educational districts, where some parents that are actually undocumented, that obviously they don't have any political rights, they participate in the decision-making process about the education of their children. Therefore, this is some sort of a de facto integration that it is, to me, an indication that some way in the United States they will follow a pattern of integration in the not the very near future, but in the future of immigration as a phenomenon of population, particularly labor migration in the context of immigration from Mexico and other countries to the United States. Well, this is in fact something that I use to explain the notion of vulnerability, which I define as the condition imposed to the migrants by the host societies and by the host governments as subjects of human rights, and that of course has a different kind of levels of expressions. When I visited the United States in my role as a special rapporteur for the human rights of migrants, I was gladly surprised that the United States government decided to invite me because, as you probably know, special rapporteurs of the United Nations don't go to other countries they want, but only to countries where they have received an official invitation from the respective countries. And since in the past I have been critical of the policies, of immigration policies of the United States, going back to when I was a graduate student in the times of the Rodino Bill in the 70s, I thought that that was that probably didn't make me very popular in the Department of State, so when I received the invitation, I was very gladly surprised. I came to the United States in that capacity, and I visited a number of states with hearings with migrants, and I was very impressed with the reports of what happened in terms of the rates of the immigration authorities under the new Department of ICE, Immigration, Custom Enforcement of the Homeland Security, and their narrations of their experiences. In summary, experiences such as authorities from Homeland Security getting to a house, knocking at the door, and when the inhabitants came closer to the door, pushing the door and entering by force with their hands, looking for a person that they claim to be a criminal that justified their actions. The people in the house saying, you know, we don't know that person, nobody with that name lives here. But in the meantime, arresting all the adults of the house and sometimes leaving behind children that were literally abandoned in many cases, and in spite of the fact that many of these children, actually the majority, were children born in the United States, therefore US citizens. Well, this kind of experience is something that when I published this, let me see. Well, I use that in my report as a special rapporteur. I use the data that came from that hearings in terms of all the or the patterns that I found in terms of that abuse of power in violation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution as a practice, a regular practice in several places of the United States. And when I presented my report to the General Assembly of the Council of Human Rights of the United Nations, the representative of the United States government, she said that what I have said was false. Simply discarded everything that I said as something that never happened. And a year after my report, there was a publication of a research conducted by the prestigious Law Institute, the Cardozo Institute in New York, that decided the faculty and students to conduct some research about the practice of the race. And they found that this is some of the data that comes from that publication, which title is Constitution on Ice. I strongly recommend anyone interested in immigration to get a hold of that publication, Constitution on Ice. That is a report on a research on the practice of raids in residential areas where immigrants tend to live, particularly immigrants from Mexico. And Constitution on Ice, this publication confirms what I have said a year before in my report. Actually, not only in terms of the main findings, but it actually expanded, providing a lot of hard data on the ways these raids were conducted, which to me were examples of my conceptualization of extreme conditions of vulnerability. These figures are some of the findings of what they found in the research focusing the state of New Jersey, and in which the authorities that came to these home raids obtained consent only in 76% of the cases. Obviously, the United States Constitution imposes the obligation to authorities to request the consent of the inhabitants of the house as one of the elements that could be conducive to the entry of these police into the houses. And here, what I'm saying is that in 76% of the cases, actually, ICE obtained consent. In 24% of the cases, they didn't. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States required that not only the consent, but actually that the actions of entering a house, a home house, is require the order of a judge that according to the letter of the Constitution, it has to be a judge, not any kind of judge, but a judge that is of a federal level, that allow for the entry of the house. Well, in 24 of the cases, in the case of New Jersey, but look at the case of Long Island, that in 86% of the cases, ICE agents failed to obtain consent. That is something that, to me, now it's appeared like some sort of a secret in the United States, because when I asked my students, my graduate students, if they knew about this kind of data, with no exceptions, they say they have never heard of this. And actually, some of my undergraduate students, they look at this data with a lot of skepticism, and some of them confessing, you know, I never thought that something like this, which is hard data, could happen in the United States. But this is what I mean by extreme vulnerability as a condition imposed to immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants. This is the bars. Actually, it's interesting because the ICE agents. Actually, ICE agents are the substitution for the what used to be INS. But ICE agents used as an excuse that they were looking for a criminal. So here, this bar shows that in the case of New Jersey, only in 66% they found the target of the order to enter the house. In 87%, they didn't, and the actions are referred to collateral, which is a euphemism to say the rest of the inhabitants of the house. This, in the case of Long Island, is 66% found the target of the actions, of the orders of the actions that justify the entry of ICE agents, but 94% of the cases in Long Island were collaterals, that is, people that didn't have anything to do, no criminal record. Has a different kind of levels of expressions. When I visited the United States in my role as a special rapporteur for the human rights of migrants, I was gladly surprised that the United States government immigration from Mexico and other countries to the United States. Well, this is in fact something that I used to explain the notion of vulnerability, which I define as the condition imposed to the migrants by the host societies and by the host governments as subjects of human rights. And that, of course, that it is, to me, an indication that some way in the United States they will follow a pattern of integration in the not the very near future, but in the future of immigration as a phenomenon of population, particularly labor migration in the context of. But nevertheless, this is something that represents a theoretical frame in which the hypothesis is that some way this will mark the evolution of the human rights of the migrants in the world, and certainly even though the United States and Mexico are far away from the experience of integration that I'm illustrating here, in the United States already are happening certain things, such as what you find in California's educational districts, where some parents that are actually undocumented, that obviously they don't have any political rights, they participate in the decision-making process about the education of their children. Therefore, this is some sort of a de facto integration